Orchid. I'm so excited to have you on today. Welcome to the Equestrian Adult Amateur for another great episode. This one's going to be a real treat because this is kind of in my lane.
Yeah.
Alexis, you're going to have a really good time with this one.
Marketing.
So, Orchid, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's just us girls. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this.
I know. Well,
I love your room that you're in.
I know.
I need to redecorate.
Oh, thank you. I wallpapered it myself,
Ooh.
much to my husband's dismay, because I'm like in here, like it's all half up, and I have this habit of half starting things. So he just walks past and he just goes, ugh. And I'm like, well, you don't even have to do anything. This is just all me. I got it.
Yeah,
I got it.
I totally have this under control.
It looks amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, well, this episode, like I said, is really, I've been really amped. When Orchid and I first talked, I think we talked for like over an hour.
It was like your vibe.
I was like, this is so much. I was like, I literally said to her, I was like, I could literally talk to you for so long. But for the sake of keeping some of this stuff for the show, Orchid, tell everybody who you are, what you do. And if you guys haven't seen Orchid on social media with her famous business hat.
I love it.
It's so great. Such great branding. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us all the things.
Thank you. So I'm Orchid Bertelsen. I've spent about 20 years in digital marketing and digital strategy. I most recently had a stint in private equity, which is not something that I tell a lot of people.
It sounds so sexy.
It is and it isn't. I was looking for love in all the wrong places. But basically, I thought it was going to be much more fulfilling than it actually was. And I am apparently the last person on earth to find that out. So I was in private equity, and then I started riding again last September. I had taken a 25-year hiatus.
Wow.
You know, I had competed in hunter jumper equitation in locally rated shows in the Chicagoland area in the 90s. And then, you know, hung up my helmet. I think like a lot of us do. Went off, had a career, got married. I have 2 kids. And really kind of found myself as I approached midlife. I'm 43, so I'm pretty sure that's midlife. And really thinking about who I am and what I do for myself that isn't for other people or in the service of other people, whether it's my family or my work. So last September, I decided to go back and, you know, start riding again. And my husband bought me like a 6-pack of lessons at the local barn, which is only 15 minutes away. So we're very, very lucky. And I think as all of us horse girls know, riding is not a casual sport. And I am not a casual person. So obviously once I started taking lessons again, I'm like, okay, well, I need to half lease a horse. I need to go compete. I'm going to ride 3 times a week. And it was just, it was very much full send. And I think it went full send to the point where I'm like, I'm going to quit my job. So I do not recommend picking up the most expensive sport and then going ahead and quitting your job. I don't think it was an A led to B, but it was really about me reorienting myself around what I wanted for my life. Because there are so many times where we look around and say, in my next life, I'm going to do that in my next life. Like when I come back, like that's what I'm going to do. And I really put my foot down and said, not in the next life, but in this life, what do I want for myself? That makes me a better person to show up more for the people that I love. So I moved out of private equity. I will say about, it was 29 days ago.
Crazy.
Very recent.
Very recent.
Very recent. And just kind of stepped into the equestrian abyss in a way. I had started my social media, so Orchid in the Saddle, both on Instagram and TikTok, really around September of last year. I don't have any horsey friends, so it was really about tapping back into a community that has changed over the past 30 years. So I did it as a way to really document my journey coming back into the sport. I think that there are a lot of us as second wave riders or re-riders who stepped away and are now coming back. And then really just trying to understand why the sport feels different. Like, why are breeches all $250?
Oh, literally.
Why is it that people seem to think that you need a $70,000 horse to be competitive? Like, there are so many downstream effects that we feel. And what I really wanted to do through my social media was just to understand the economic reasons driving those changes that we feel. So now I'm kind of like dabbling. I'm consulting with some brands. I'm still leaning into content creation. So you're getting me at an interesting point in my life.
I love this so much. The amount of times that I think I'm like, I'm just going to quit my job and I'm going to like go work for Kelly, or I'm just going to be like, I don't know, I can just like work in the barn or something. The amount of times that I've done it, I'm like, I just need to find happiness. And then I get scared. So big props to you for doing it, living this life.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a little scary. I mean, I had my first job when I was 15. I worked at the local Timberland at the mall. And everything that I have today is because I created it or, made the money myself. So this is really the first time that I'm without a steady paycheck. And again, I think it really just comes down to spotting opportunities where there are in the equestrian world. And I think there are so many, which I know we'll get into. And then also just this idea of self-belief. I was a chief operating officer at a growth agency for a while that went through a turnaround. And I was having a moment where we were doing a round of layoffs, which is the most difficult thing you will ever do as a business leader. If it's not difficult, you're probably doing something wrong.
Or just soulless.
I was asking. I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that or it's a coping mechanism or whatever, because at the end of the day, as an employer, you made a promise to your employees, right? And most often than not, the reason that the business is failing is because of something you, the leader, did. That's just true. And the people who are going to have to bear the brunt of that are the employees that you made promises to. So at the end of the day, layoffs do happen because your job as a business leader is to save the business, because if the business is saved, you could always hire people back. But if the business is not saved, like, everyone's done. So I was about to go into my first round of layoffs that I had ever done in my career. And I was talking to a friend who had much more experience than I did. And he's like, I believe that you can do it. And I was like, is it because you believe in me? He's like, sure. But I believe you can do it because lesser people than you have succeeded. I was like, okay.
Okay, that's fair.
Confidence.
Yeah.
But I do think that that's something that we have to remember as well, which is like, believe in yourself, your talent, your ability to do hard work and to do difficult things. And you look around and people with not as much talent or conviction have succeeded. So why not you?
I could literally speak on that for at least the next hour, because, there's so many times where I've gotten myself in that type of situation where I just feel like, oh my God, like, there's no way I'm going to be able to either to make this happen, get out of this hole, push past this, like whatever that thing is. And that thought comes across your mind where you're like, well, there are a lot less competent human beings doing way more than this. So I need to just bear this and just push right straight through it. And it does help, like in those moments, like it really does. And I think, that could be said, for so many different things, whether that's your writing, your business, like
my husband says it all the time. He, like, when I first got pregnant and have had Baker now, he was like people with way less like abilities have had kids and they've survived. So like, I'm pretty sure we got this. And I was like, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I will say, we can have a whole other conversation about what it means to be mothers in this world. But there is a difference between surviving and thriving, right?
Yeah.
And I do think, especially in this sport, it already takes so much commitment and being like this ability to be present that you balancing being a mother and having a career, you kind of just like, people just take little pieces of it. It's like The Giving Tree, which is the most depressing book you've ever read.
It's so depressing.
We'll take a reread. So like, let's not be the Giving Tree.
Yes.
And save something for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great segue into kind of talking about like the opening of this conversation. That's really what you started with, is really just providing something for yourself. And I think a lot of the time people have a really hard time even navigating that, because they don't even realize what's happening in their own personal minds and their personal lives. And they wake up and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm not doing anything for me. Like how can I do that? And I think equestrian it's interesting because, you know, I have the horses at home, and I'm sure that you guys have had like non-horsey friends come to your barn, and they're just like, people's reaction to equestrian that are outside of it, or not equestrian, but just horses in general. I had an old friend that I used to go to the gym with. She came to my house for like a girls' wine night recently, and she had been going through something really terrible in her life anyway, but all she wanted to do is literally just go walk out in the pasture and just hug the horses. She was
Mm-hmm.
like, being around them is just like, it is transformative. Like, it's so moving, it's so therapeutic. And I think people don't even realize how much they need something until something like that happens. So how do you feel like us as women in the equestrian space, like, how do you feel like that affects us as a whole? I mean, like, and I know
Mm-hmm.
you have been going through something
Yeah.
like very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you are taking a break from riding, whether you're getting back into it, whether you've been in, like, I've been in it for 35 years, and you know, sometimes I still feel like, God, like, am I filling my cup up? Like, am I still feeling fulfilled, you know?
Yeah. I will say when I started writing again, like that season of my life was probably the hardest season. My mom passed away. She had 3 battles with cancer about
I'm
two and a
so
half years
sorry.
ago. So when that happened, I moved my stepdad from Chicago to near me, which is in Michigan. And he basically, and so, you know, we're kind of in this millennial women, I think we're in this interesting position where we're part of the sandwich generation, which is that we are taking care of young kids and we're starting to take care of our aging parents.
Mm-hmm.
And my stepdad just kind of YOLO'd retirement.
Love it.
He had no savings to speak of. And he's like, yeah, it just kind of snuck up on me. I was like, retirement doesn't really like sneak up on you, especially when you're 70, but
Yeah.
here we are. And so after I moved him, you know, he had some money from when we sold his condo and, you know, sold his cars, things like that. And I wasn't really keeping track of his finances. I'm like, okay, we have enough to like pay for independent living, things like that. And he had some pension coming in. Well, all of a sudden, one day in October, so remember, I started writing in September. In October, I open his bank account app on his phone and he has $0.
No.
And I was like, cool. And independent living, you know, especially senior care in America
so
is
expensive.
so deeply broken. I mean, for independent living, it was $8,000 a month.
It's crazy.
For assisted living, it's easily $11,000 a month. And so if you're not actively saving and really planning for your retirement pretty far out, you can get really caught off guard. And so he qualified for Medicaid. And so I went through the, you know, process of applying for Medicaid for him during the government shutdown. So you can imagine those offices are really hard to get a hold of. And this whole time, there's obviously this guilt because I've done well for myself, you know, through my career, you know, sold an agency, you know, about 2 years ago. So, you know, had some money for my kids to go to college someday, for my own retirement. And now I've started the most expensive sport while my stepdad can't afford to live effectively. And so just holding that emotional like burden, I think was very overwhelming.
Yeah.
The whole time you're trying to make sure that your kids are dressed and have lunch packed and go to dance and go to, you know, gymnastics and go to softball and all of these other activities that they have. So in that moment, I was like, I need to either make time for my space or I'm going to break down and I can't help anybody. And I don't know what recovery will look like because I'm still working a very demanding full-time job as well. So, you know, when I started writing again, I was like, okay, well, you know, when I go to the barn for my lesson, that is a 2-hour block, right? Because you are grooming your horse, you're tacking your horse up, you're doing your lesson, you're doing cool down, you're doing all of the things. And at that time, I was like, okay, this is the only space where I can truly disconnect, where no one needs anything from me except for my horse for me to be present. I'm not scrolling on my phone. I don't have notifications. And all he wants is for me to be here and for me to be fully aware of what is happening with my body and my mood and for us to work in partnership. And unfortunately, like during that time, it had to be such a drastic place for me to be put in where I'm like, there are no distractions. There is nothing else for you to take care of except for yourself. And I'm like, okay, coming out of that more energized so I can support other people. And then I said, well, what if I did this 3 times a week? And I'm like, well, that's crazy. How can I set aside 2 hours 3 times a week to take care of myself? And then I'm like, no. What's crazy is that thought. That thought is crazy.
Yeah.
Is that of all the hours in a week, I cannot put aside 6 hours to just focus on refueling myself, like, filling up my cup in service of other people and in service of myself. And I just didn't want to be one of those people who, their kids move to college or go off to college and they have nothing in common with their spouse and they don't know who they are.
Happens
like,
so
I just didn't
much.
want that.
Yeah.
It does.
Happens
and it's understandable
so
why it happens, right? Because every single day, especially with kids, like what's the saying? The hours are long, but the days are short.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go through a day and then you look back at night and you're like, I'm exhausted and I don't feel like I accomplished anything.
Yeah.
And so when you're in that cycle of survival, because kids are a lot, and it takes a lot of support to, I think, provide the family experience that we all see on TV.
For sure.
Or that we've been told that we can have. Or maybe that we've even lived ourselves, because it was a very different time and it took a lot of, it was a different amount to support a family, right? To be middle class, to take vacations, like everything is just so much more expensive. So, it was kind of like, for me, I'm not a casual person. So I think it had to have like a lot of things, a lot of pressure coming in at different angles for me to actually say, okay, like I need a minute in order to organize all of these things that are happening and then choose a deliberate path out of it.
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah. And I feel like I have so much to say, which shocking. But I think the thing that I find so interesting about everything that you just said is that I don't have children, but I feel like my husband and I have had so many conversations about my job. Like my job is essentially like I have my family and then I have my job. And sometimes he gets really frustrated with me about how much I entrench myself in my work. And when you're a business owner and when you're an entrepreneur, so much of who you are is your business. And I think, we've had like really, really shitty conversations, to be totally honest, and where he has been really candid with me. And he's like, look, like, I just feel like your work is your priority. And I feel like your family comes second. And, that really sucks. I really hate that. And and those things are always really hard to hear. And I think that again, like it's when I said before, sometimes you don't even realize it when it's happening. Like you feel like, okay, well, I'm doing all these things. Just as I would assume, as a parent and as a mother, you just get so entrenched in your day and like your, like your day-to-day task, and you like don't even look up because you're just like so down and like in it. And then you realize and you're like, oh my God, wait, like Alexis and I talk about this all the time. My horses are literally like 20 yards from my front door. And sometimes I literally can't even take the time to go out there. There's like no fucking excuse.
Yeah.
Like, but I'm just like, I'm like so just ingrained and entrenched of like, and it's just a terrible habitual thing that I like a cycle. And I think that so many women get in that cycle. And I think that, same thing for you,
I struggle.
Yeah. And I think that you just don't even realize, but then it's like, you get out there and like, I know you're and I've had
so at peace.
Yeah. You go to the barn and you're just like, you call me on the way home and you're just like I can hear your smile.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, like I just had the greatest time. And it's because we take the time to actually do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think as women, it's just so hard. Like, my husband, I love him to death, but like, he has no problem being like, I'm going to do whatever,
Yeah,
right.
True.
Like, and I'm like, sweet, like, great. And I think that there comes with some like resentment between like men and women in that sense, because it's like, why don't you have this emotional like attachment to like,
I feel like I can't like leave my child to go ride and like just check out for an hour or two. Like, and that's my own guilt. And my husband would say that's your own guilt. Like, go do it. And I'm just like, ugh. I don't know if it's like my like full send like you are for like everything you do. It's like I'm full send a parent right now, and that feels like I can't be my own person.
Yeah.
How old is your kid?
He is 16 months.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, like your hormone levels don't go back to normal for 24 months. So you're still very much in it, and I would say a lot of the guilt you probably feel is honestly biological.
That makes me feel better.
We can't leave our kid because, you know, back in the days when we lived in caves, if we left them for an hour, like
they would get
who
eaten.
knows what'll happen.
Right.
Like, you know, a saber-toothed tiger will come. So a lot of it will settle as your kid gets older. But I will also say, and this is like the tough love part of it, is that everything is a choice.
Yeah.
And I think that as women, a lot of times, and I think this is cultural upbringing, I think this is a lot of society, but it's like well, look at what I gave up to do this. Like, why are you not grateful? And it's like, well, don't be the martyr.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're not going to win prizes for skipping riding or skipping taking care of yourself. Right? 100%. No one's going to give you a medal for that.
No,
like you're the only person who's going to suffer from that.
Yeah.
So it really is like you have to make the choice to make it a priority. Otherwise, there are always excuses and always reasons to pull you away.
Yeah.
Like you have, like your husband's a dad. So like he should be able to take care of your kid without you there for an hour or two.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like give him the opportunity to step into that. Because I bet you he loves having a happier version of you coming home.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Orchid, when you were like, okay, I made the commitment, I'm going to do 3 days a week, how did that shift your whole world?
Yeah, it's a couple of different ways because, you know, again, like when you're self-funded, like you're watching every dollar when it comes to riding and understanding how sustainable it is, right? So, you know, the math actually worked out that me taking lessons twice a week was far cheaper than half leasing a horse and riding 3, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just how the math works out. And for me, it wasn't what I thought I was signing up for was riding 3 times a week. What I actually signed up for was expanding my idea of horsemanship beyond riding. And I think a lot of what's out there in social media and conversation, like in content, is such a focus on riding when you know as a horse owner and as a horseman that is just such a small percentage of what it actually even is to be around horses. And so the analogy I use is golfing. Like you spend all that time at the driving range and you're only driving like 18 times, but like your mid and your short game, like that's really what you should be practicing because that's where the game is.
Right.
And I think that that's the same thing with riding and this idea of horsemanship, of listening to your horse, of making sure that he's stretched, of like, you know, checking for discomfort. Why is he not moving forward? Well, there's probably a reason behind that. It's like, okay, are you just spending time grazing? Are you building the partnership outside of the saddle? Because I didn't want, and I'm half leasing a Cell Francais named Beau. He's 17.3, so he's like, Beau. And I'm 5'4". He's like
huge.
way too.
Oh my God, he's huge.
He's enormous.
I love that.
He's enormous, and he has an opinion. And so for me, like I didn't want our relationship to be transactional. I didn't want me to show up and he's like, okay, we're going to work. I was like, hey, like let's just hang out. And so this like access to a horse 3 times a week, like riding 3 times a week turned into access to a horse 3 times a week. To me, just like hanging out at the barn a lot of the time as my third space, right? Because I think this was like very in vogue during COVID, or like right after COVID, because we had only worked out of our home and then our work. We needed a third space to go to that wasn't those 2 things. And so I think like, you know, after COVID, after everybody just kind of ended up working at home, those were like coffee places. And I just never considered that the barn could be the third space for me to get me out from this desk or, you know, away from like school drop off and like to a place that was like purely mine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually the happy surprise when it came to half leasing. And, you know, I also didn't want to buy a horse too early because I was still trying to figure out what my goals were. you know, because I showed before, I was like, okay, we're going to show again. But I was like, maybe not. Maybe success feels very different for me now than it did when I was 13. Like that's like a very logical thing to think. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to, like, do I want a project? Do I want a packer now because I'm older and I'm afraid about, you know, falling off? Like, how high do I want to jump? Like, what kind of temperament do I want? And so all of these things go into deciding whether or not this horse is a good long-term partner for you. I also knew, like, I'm not in the business of flipping horses. I don't feel like I wasn't going to be like, okay, let me buy a horse. I'm going to have it for a year and then sell it. I mean, like, if that's what people do, like, that's for them. But like, personally for me, I'm like, okay, like, what does this partnership look like? And I know that I'm going to get emotionally attached. Like, I can't help it. They're beautiful and cute.
Yeah.
And the relationship you build and partnership you build in the saddle is totally different. But I will say, like, not buying a horse is really hard because the algorithm's kind of like working against you, right? You open Instagram, they're like, what about this cute horse? What about this cute horse? This horse is for
they're
sale.
everywhere.
You should adopt this thoroughbred.
And I swear to you, honestly, I've done it.
She knows. Like, she has 3.
Well, yeah. And like, sometimes I feel like, you know, there are a couple creators out there that I swear, me being one of them, I'm fine to admit it, where they're like, if I get a horse, more content. You know, horse equals more content.
I agree with that.
No,
I think that's true.
You know what I mean? Yes. Yep. And so, and I think too, like, I mean, it's just the way that the world is. I mean, again, I don't want to say that was like my reason for doing it, but like, it does make for good content. And you're like, if that's your main source of income, or if that's where you're wanting to go, you're like, oh, like, as if you needed an extra push to like do it. You know what I mean? So,
well, we can rationalize anything.
Totally.
I think is part of it. And I'll be, you know, because you were so honest about it, I mean, like, I'll share, like, that was certainly a consideration for me of like the type of horse I was leasing. I'm like, okay, well, like, what does this horse say about how serious I am about the sport? Like, you know, and the truth is that, you know, I started leasing Bo in February, and like, you know, Self Francais, like, they are opinionated. They want you, like, for him at least, like, and I asked ChatGPT about his personality, and apparently it's very on brand for his breed. But, you know, it's a very tight feedback loop. Like, he's not a packer. Like, you have to ride him.
Yeah.
And he was probably more horse than I was ready for at that point when I started leasing him. But like, I do feel like I'm progressing faster because he's asking me to be more aware and more detail oriented when I think about my aids, my cues, like, you know, our timing. And so, but, you know, I'd be lying if I didn't say, like, hey, I think that having a horse like him, riding a horse like him, like, just shows or, like, you know, supports like my seriousness of the sport.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's totally fair. And I think, you know, I think so much of the time, and I think when you're in this, like, I don't know, you can't be blind to the fact that people are, you know, judgy, and their perception is important. And
of course,
not that it's important, but like it needs to be thought about. Like, people are going to think about it and whatnot. And, you know, I don't think that it really matters. Like, I don't really give a shit what people think about me necessarily, but I definitely feel like, you know, there's a very strong difference of, you know, being in someone's like backyard type of, you know, backyard ring, like, type of vibe versus being at somewhere that's a little bit more established. I think that will also affect the perception of like what people are thinking, right? Like, so I think that's like totally normal and natural for everyone to kind of feel that way. And I don't know.
It is, but like, I kind of sort of hate it because like, you can have your horses at home and be a true horse person, and then you could be somebody that's at like a top barn that has their horse tacked up and for them, and there's a groom and whatever, and they're considered more serious. And so like, that's kind of frustrating for me because, like you were saying, like, spending the time with the horse is getting to know them, is part of the sport.
Yes.
It is like how you know and be the best person for that horse, and then a lot of people don't spend that time with them. So
I completely agree. And I do feel, I completely agree with you when you said that, you know, horsemanship is such a lost part of the sport.
So lost.
And I saw on your I think on your socials that you were like, I went to the barn and I groomed and I tacked and like I
Yeah, we
ended
just
up,
hung out.
yeah, and just like didn't ride. And I think again, going back to that kind of like, you and I have talked about this a lot, especially with the young horses, where like they can get a little sour because you just consistently just kind of like
teach them
go,
every day.
train. And you're like, well, let's like just like chill. Can we like just like go on a trail ride, or like we can go graze? Like, we can get on bareback and like go
just mess around.
Do whatever, and I think that is so much of and I don't know if that's social. I don't know if that's just the competitive nature of humans where like, we just feel like if we're not progressing and we're not moving forward, then like, what are we doing? I'm not really sure where that comes from. And I mean, I think about even in other sports and, think about like, kids baseball or like anything like that, whether it's the child or the parent, it can get like really intense in terms of training. And like, then you kind of forget like, well, what are we even doing this for?
No.
But anyway, so I love this conversation. I think it's just been such a great one to have, and I love that it's kind of gone down the emotional side.
Yeah.
But I know
I want to hear I want to hear your factual stuff.
Well, no, we're about to get into the
finance of it.
Well, the finance, and then also just like the business side of things, because Alexis and I were talking. I was like, I think we should ask her about, like properly, and like, is there a proper way to rationalize investing in a horse?
Yeah,
my husband would say no.
I have. Yeah, I think your husband's probably right.
Yeah, 100%.
So I do think, I mean, even with horse ownership, right? Like, part of it is, okay, if I buy this horse and it doesn't work out, do I sell it for like the same or more? But the reality is, like, we're not spending money on the horses as an investment for most of us anyway.
No.
There's obviously people who are.
Yeah.
And so you really kind of have to just look at it as, this is the money that I'm spending for the experience I'm going to have. Because what I was trying to rationalize was the difference between buying and then just leasing. And, the math, where it's one of those things where you can get caught in a trap where it says, well, if I'm leasing this horse for $75,000 or $25,000 a year, and it's a $75,000 horse, then like, what am I paying that money for? Because that's just lost. Mm-hmm. Maybe I save that and then actually invest it in like the purchase of a horse. But we're not talking about cars, right?
Yeah, or houses even, yeah.
So at the end of the day, like, for your year of riding, you could either spend $75,000, be fully on the hook for board, for medicals, for shows, for all those things, or you pay, and I would say like in that situation, if it's a $25,000 full year lease, then half lease is $12,500. So for the same horse, you're paying $12,500 for the privilege of riding them 3 times a week. You are splitting your board costs. You are splitting medical. And this was something that I negotiated in my contract as well, my leasing contract. I was like, okay, medical, splitting that. Like, what does that even mean? Does that mean regular annual checkups, regular vet visits, or is this like catastrophic, like medical things? Because those are very different dollar amounts.
Yes.
And so when I negotiated the lease, they're like, hey, like, we're going to do like the catastrophic stuff. But for you, half medical means the standard regular, wellness visits and like the vet visits, things like that. And so when you're going into a leasing contract, I think this is part of it too. Like, you have to read it carefully and then also think, worst case scenario, what am I protected against? Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, I do not own this horse. I am paying for access to this horse. Mm-hmm. So I will say, like, tying like the equestrian business piece, why I went down the business angle was because I do think, and this is true of a lot of small businesses, a lot of owners start them because they see a gap in the market, or, they wanted something, they wanted to buy something and they saw that no one was making it. So they wanted to solve that problem for themselves. They didn't get into it because they're like, oh, I see this white space opportunity and I think gross margins can be 80%. Like, that's that rarely ever happens generally. And so I really just don't think that happens in equestrian, when it is so much more of an emotional attachment to the sport and to the horses themselves. And so I do think, like, it's for us, like, again, being self-funded, we have to look at every dollar and make sure that we're protected and understanding like exactly what we're paying for. So half leases, contracts, read them, understand them. Don't be afraid to negotiate on the terms in order to get clarity. And so one of the other things I negotiated was the contract length. So there was another half leaser who their contract ended in September. And when I picked up the lease in February, I was like, okay, like a year-long contract feels very long for me. Again, I only started writing a few months ago, rewriting.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, hey, can you actually match up the end of my contract with the other half leasers? I'm like, this actually gives you much more flexibility to have both leases end at the same time. So if you need to sell the horse, that you can cleanly do that. And so that you don't have these staggered leases.
Yeah.
So there are all these things that you are able to at least have a conversation around, because how that other party negotiates you will tell you a lot about how that relationship is going to go as well. So that's like one piece of like the business aspect that's a little more personal. I think with equestrian, because so much of it is word of mouth, I think a lot of like the data and technology infrastructure is really behind the rest of e-commerce, other categories. And because a lot of these businesses, I think you said this, but are private, like you just don't get a lot of access to how they're performing behind the scenes. So, you know, a large part of my content creation is just deep research in understanding the size of the business, the size of the opportunity, starting with questions like, why are breeches $250?
Yeah.
Why do they all look the same, just with different logos? And there are a lot of like good reasons why that is. So I do the deep research, understand like, hey, from a consumer lens, like what do I need to know in order to be more educated and decisive about where I spend my dollars and who I spend them with? Because when you're spending money, especially in a very insular community like this, like you are supporting people, right? You're supporting people, you're supporting their values. I feel like that's more equestrian than like, or horse people than like any other category, is that we are going to funnel our dollars to people we believe in and who we want to, who believe that, you know, we have the same values and the sustainability and the future of the sport.
What's the most shocking?
Really,
oh, sorry. What's the most shocking thing
ahead,
that
please.
you found in your research?
A couple of things. I think one is that the size of the horse apparel and equipment industry is much smaller than anybody thinks. So I see a couple of numbers floating around there about the size of the horse industry. One of them is 300 billion globally, and then another one is like 15 to 16 billion. And the difference between those numbers is what they actually include in the business of horses. So the 300 billion global number includes gambling. It includes the actual horses themselves.
Yeah.
It includes transportation. It includes, you know, those vacations that you go on where you ride horses. Like it is all in 300 billion.
Oh my God.
But if I am an apparel or a saddle brand, what I care about is that $16 billion number, because that is the global size of the equestrian apparel and equipment industry, right? So when I am like selling product, there is a ceiling to how many people are actually interested in my product. And let's just use the $15 billion number. So that's globally, that's apparel, equipment, that is English and Western. So that's why I need people to understand, like, hey, like equestrian apparel brands will never get to the scale of a Lululemon or a Nike in order to drive those prices down. Their initial orders and runs of their products are just so much smaller. And so when you produce 20 breeches versus 2,000 breeches, your price per is just going to change, which will impact your pricing and your margin profile anyway. So that's what I think, like, that was the most surprising, because when you say horses, people are like, oh, there's a lot of money in horses. And I'm like, okay, that's true, but it depends on what your goal is and like what you're trying to understand. So I think that was one. I think there's like two more. Another one was just how underserved the amateur adult rider is.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say millennial women, you know, I think that's like a good generational piece of it. You know, clothing's not really designed for her. It's a lot of riding clothes. Like, you want me post 2 kids to squeeze myself into a spandex riding jumpsuit?
Yeah,
that's
no.
insane.
I've seen those.
I'm not wearing full body spandex anything.
No.
And then you're going to tell me that if I need to go to the bathroom, like before my riding lesson, I'm stripping naked in the barn bathroom with that Lycra jumpsuit. Like, we're not doing that.
No.
And then, so I do think like the products themselves, you know, I would position it as like, hey, is there like more lower body support? Like, is it, you know, built in a way that is more flattering as like the sizes get bigger? Is it compression in the right places so that, you know, I'm not already self-conscious about my riding and my posting, but now I'm self-conscious about watching my video back and like seeing like these ill-fitting breeches. Like that's just like my nightmare. And I know that's a very first world problem, but still, like, you know, so like, how are products being made for us? And then I will add, it's the communication and like marketing of those products. You know, this is why the fashion industry walks like 6 foot tall models in a size 0 down the runway. Is the same reason why a lot of brands will use a size 0 tween in order to feature their products. They look really good in them.
They look really good. Yeah.
They look fantastic. Or it's professional riders, Olympians, top elite riders, right? And so like those of us who have horses in our backyard, just want to be comfortable. We're doing a variety of barn chores and riding, but still feel stylish and put together because I'm spending money on this, or this fits my overall aesthetic. Like that's just missing in marketing in a very big way.
I think the main thing that I've taken away from this conversation is that the adult amateur is underserved. And we kind of knew that. And we knew that the adult amateur is we knew that the adult amateur was the primary like bulk of the sport. Because Orchid, we've gotten in some heat recently.
Oh yeah.
Just to give you
for what?
Just some tea. Oh, just like silly, like we recorded a podcast and titled it that it was a question of, are amateurs the problem in the horse world? And the internet like blew up about it. And
mad.
Yeah, people were super upset about it. So you know, that was like everybody's complaint was like, well, amateurs like make up the bulk of the sport. And I was like, we know.
For sure.
Like it was the whole episode was like pro amateur anyway. So the one thing that I really want to hit on is that the average, we took this notes from one of your videos that the industry says that the adult amateur spends $11,000 a year. But in reality, we're spending close to $25,000 a year.
Is that on the horse
25
or on
to 38.
stuff?
I do think 38 probably closer to the truth. So the range is 25 to 38. I will say generally with research in the equestrian industry, it's pretty opaque. And what happens is that there are some research firms. So that's what I'm trying to solve for is like, okay, how can we get better and more accurate numbers? So I will say the range of what amateur equestrians are probably spending is a range of 25 to 38,000 on average. And I learned from my video that people don't know what an average is because a lot of them were like, well, I spend $38,000 a month. And I was like, cool.
That's not the
average. Good for you.
Yeah, and then someone's like, I spend $3,000 a year because I'm in Montana and my horses are in my backyard. I was like, cool. So like, what an average is. So at the end of the day, there are going to be people who spend far more and far less. But I do think 38,000 like feels like a sweet spot if you were talking about, and this is just like to engage in the sport. So again, like this is where the average differs. You have people who are taking weekly lessons against people who are also like competing in the sport and going to a show once a month, once every other month. You have people who are leasing horses versus purchasing horses. So it really is like, that's why it's like there's so much nuance in it.
Yeah.
But the takeaway is that we're spending far more on this sport than what we get credit for.
100%. And I think it's interesting too because, you know, we say this sometimes and it always like we casually say this and then Alexis and I both have to like stop and like recount what we just said, but this is a hobby, you know, like this is a hobby and adult amateurs are doing this as a hobby. And I think that's such a crazy number to like really like sit with. But, you know, and also the conversation that's been had a lot recently is that this sport is so expensive and it's everybody's like kind of pissed about it. And it's like, well, what do you like? it's always been expensive. Like, it's always like,
Mm-hmm.
even back, like when my mom talks about it all the time, like when I was young and she was paying for it and she was like, yeah, like we would scrounge so that you could like
It's
go to a horse
crazy.
show.
Yep. Totally.
And, and it's like kind of crazy and people are so, I don't, it's of course like millennial or Gen Z women that are like upset that it's so expensive. And I'm like, well, look, y'all, like, nothing's changed. Like, it's still the same. We're just now paying for it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just
I think
tough.
that's a part of it. I do think too, like we can break down the economics of it. So I would say if we look at $38,000 for an annual hobby, that's on par with a lot of golf club
I was
memberships.
gonna say
Yeah.
golf.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, golf
So
clubs are what, like $125,000 like membership? Like,
so
crazy.
depends. So your buy-in,
Yeah.
like let's say your buy-in's $40,000. Okay, I would equate that to buying a horse. So
Yeah.
your cost of entry is either the member club entry fee or a horse.
Yep.
And then you have your monthly, like in terms of golf clubs, you have your monthly dues, right? You probably have a food and beverage like kind of credit that you need to spend. So I would say, horses as a hobby is probably on par with like a golf club.
Yep.
Okay,
What
that
I
makes me
will
feel
say
better.
it differs is that a golf club membership, you can bring your family. So there's always
Yeah.
hey, this is like, where we're going to go for dinner. Like, we build our community here. It's more for the family. Whereas like horses are largely more of an individual thing. So like, I'm
Yeah.
not bringing my kids to the barn because I don't want them to get kicked in the face or like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
just be annoying, honestly, to both me and the horses. So as a hobby, like, again, it is an elite hobby, but you kind of talk about the economics of it. Like if you're running a lesson barn, like your school horses have to do a minimum number of lessons a day in order to pay that back.
Right.
You're not, and you have to build in the cost of wear and tear on the horses. You have to bake in the cost of days off of the horses. You have to bake in your trainer fees, your saddles, your equipment for the horses. That is all in. And so that's why I've seen quite a number of people get really upset at different lesson prices. I think someone in Manhattan was paying like $150 for a 1 hour group lesson.
Yeah.
Some people are paying like $70 for the same lesson, like in Illinois, whatever it is. But you do also have to take into consideration, like horses take a lot of land. Like it is just not cheap
Yeah.
to have a large amount of land and the facilities and the staff to maintain horses.
Yeah.
So another thing I see people complain about is how much board is every month. And again, that price can range the gamut. You can have $300 and it's 24/7, like, outside turnout. Or you could be at a show barn, which is like multiple thousands of dollars, but you have around the clock staff, you don't have to lift a finger, whatever it is. And so I do think like what people try to do, and this is a very human thing because your brain actually consumes the most calories out of any other organ in your body. So in order to conserve calories, right? Because, in the caveman days, you don't know when you're going to have a saber-tooth tiger running after you, or if you're just going to be like napping. But in order to conserve calories, your brain takes shortcuts. So it will go to pattern recognition or being like, oh, I've seen this before. I know exactly what this is. And you're like, well, you didn't watch the second half of the video, which happens to me all of the time.
Right.
But you try to make it as easy as possible. So you jump to conclusions. So what equestrians will do, horse people, this is my observation, is that everybody has a slightly different and unique circumstance, financially, time-wise, how they engage in the sport, what they deem as serious, which we'll talk about as well. And then they see someone else and they're like, well, that doesn't match my pattern, so you're wrong.
Right.
And I do think there's something about offering a lot more grace in this sport to beginners, to amateurs, to people who are just coming in at different times of their lives. Because if we want this sport to be sustainable and grow, we need to be much more open in inviting people into it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, from my experiences, I've seen so many people come into the sport at a older age. In my mind, like, equestrian is something that, you start as like a young child, and like grow and learn how to do it and all the things, and it becomes a lifelong hobby. But there's so many people, and I don't know if it's just the age of social media or whatnot, but like so many, whether it's like Gen Z, millennials, like come into the sport as an adult and they're sharing their journeys online, which I think is
It's
phenomenal.
so cool.
And, you know, and it makes you like, I think, really appreciate and understand like this sport's really hard. Like the
Mm-hmm.
sport is hard. It's like there's a barrier to entry. Like it's just like, but you know, it's such a, like we talked about in the beginning of this episode, is like it's such an emotional thing. Like it's so therapeutic. It's like so, you know, it's just something that fills your cup so much. And but it is like that is like such a big barrier where it is just such an expensive sport. It's very physically challenging. It's like you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with a 1,200-pound animal. Like there's a lot of things that go into it that make it a challenge. But I also think that like the community as a whole, we need to be as supportive and like encouraging for others to do it, because it is
Mm-hmm.
unlike any other sport. You know, like you just don't get that same, I mean, I'm not a golfer, but you know, I know that golfing is like a reset and a therapy in their its own way, but when you have a connection with an animal like that, it's just unlike anything else. So I really agree. I think that we need to make it as accessible as we can and inviting. And that's where the community
Mm-hmm.
part comes in, where I think the community really needs to uplift everybody. And like, you know, I think online is just like it can be so trolling anyway. You know, people just want to
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
They
whether
just want to like dunk on each other. I will say, like,
yeah,
generally, like I've been very lucky
good.
in, you know, a lot of the comments. Like, I think people are seeking to understand, and I think that that's great. Obviously, you're just going to get people left and right, who are just trying to make a point, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, just because someone has a different perspective, it doesn't make it wrong,
right.
right?
No, I agree.
And I think that that's part of it. So like even back to the serious equestrian thing, you know, of the $25,000 to $38,000 a year on average, this one woman said, well, you know, you're not a serious adult amateur unless you're spending $38,000 a month. And I was
It's
like,
so like
well, I think we have very different definitions of what serious can be, and $38,000 a month is wild.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and whether you had the $38,000 to spend or not a month, like you're still an amateur. Like whether you're
Right.
spending $2,000 a month or $38,000 a month, you're
Yeah.
still an amateur. Like
That's why I feel like we put
it's
like some amateurs put other amateurs down. So like
Mm,
there's such like a, I don't know, like the whole podcast and all
yeah,
that stuff. Like they're putting down other amateurs that are not jumping meter 30. You
yeah.
know, like
right.
I'm
Right.
still spending my, like if we put our incomes and how much we're spending percentage wise based off our income, like I'm still spending the same percentage off
Yeah.
my
Right.
income for my
Right.
horses, and what I do and what I'm able to do in the sport doesn't make me less of an adult amateur.
Well,
We're
yeah.
Yeah.
all doing the same thing.
1,000%. And if I
Mm-hmm.
want to go down to WEC and spend $2,000 a week to jump 2 foot, and I'm going to
Right.
have the time of my fucking life, you know, like
Yeah.
what does it
It
matter?
doesn't matter.
Well,
You
yeah,
know?
it's like, what's it to you, sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so I do think like it's interesting. I think social media is a bit of a blessing and a curse in a way in
Right.
many aspects of our
So for
society.
sure.
I think in equestrian sport, it's nice because you get access to different disciplines.
Yeah.
You get access to different, you know, opinions or angles on horsemanship or ground training. Like, you know, it's really funny coming back into the sport. Now I feel like I know so much more
Yeah.
about the mechanics of riding, where I'm like, did I even know what I was doing back then? Like, I didn't even think about any of this. I think I was just, you know, I'm here for a good time, not a long time sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I do think like that social media helps, especially when you have an industry where there's a lot of, well, this is how it's always been done,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right?
It's different
So
now.
I do think it opens doors, but I think like change is very scary for a lot of people. And I've always said that there's two types of people when it comes to change. It's those who embrace it or those who fight it, and only one of them wins.
Right.
Right? Like change is coming whether or not you like it. And I do think it really, it behooves people to be more open-minded.
I agree.
And like, again, like to what you're saying, like, hey, just because you're spending $38,000 a month, like we're still the same classification.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you a better rider. It could, I guess, but like also like, who cares?
I don't care. I'm not like, yeah, like I'm not going to the Olympics. Like I'm not trying to make this my profession. Like it doesn't matter. I'm literally doing this so that I can like de-stress from work and my life and like just enjoy myself. So
and it's like, how blessed are you to be able to spend so much money?
Yeah,
like
good
a lot
for
of people's
you.
annual income,
Yeah.
like on a sport that you love. And so like, it's this thing that we say to our kids that has backfired a little bit, but it's like, worry about yourself. Worry about yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Orchid, I appreciate you so much for coming on
thank
today.
you.
I
Of course,
truly,
it's been so fun.
yes, I truly enjoyed this conversation, and I know everyone else will. And like I said, I think that there were so many great topics that we hit for this, and so I'm excited for everyone to hear it and just weigh in on what their opinions are, because we know that they have them. So
yes, so many.
Well, thank you. It was so wonderful to spend this time with the both of you.
Yes, I appreciate it. We'll have to have you on again.
Yes.
And I need to know where you get your business hat so that I can get one.
I know. I actually.
It's her
funny enough,
trademark.
I have a box of 40 of them.
Oh my God! Well, you have to send. I'll buy one.
Yes, I know. No, and I was gonna glue these little horses on them for you.
God.
I love that.
These are the Breyer mini Winnies. I have a couple of them.
I
and
love
then I have
it.
this one too, which I think is very cute.
So
but basically, like at one of my former jobs, I tried to start a business hat book club. So I bought these years ago.
Oh
and then I just like never sent them to everybody. So that's why I have a box of 40 of them. So
Okay, well,
I don't know
I'll buy
that you
one.
can buy them because I've bought all of them.
Oh my God! I love it. Oh my God! All right. Well, I appreciate you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and
Thank you.
I can't wait for everyone to hear this. This is such a great
I'm
episode.
so excited.
All right,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Check you later.